Hey, Kevin.
Hey, Ellie, how have you been?
Oh, dude, I've been great. Good to hear your voice today.
Yes, it's been way too long. 4 years between records is too long for me to wait. Canyon, as a song, has really already done what you express in the song in my own heart, in particularly the line that the cracks of my broken heart will let you in. I can't get enough of that lyric. And love the Psalm 23 bridge, of course. But I'd love to hear your framework in kind of writing the song and what it means to you personally.
Sure. Well, when you write a song and you send it out into the wild and you have all these hopes and dreams, like for this little kid that was born out of
Yeah.
you, that song kid, and to hear it going off and resonating and ringing true, I don't know. It's overwhelming in a really beautiful way. So I was writing for a new record. Part of why it took me 4 years um, is I had basically written a whole other record and was well on my way to kind of recording that. And what I was writing, the first record that I wrote, which maybe I'll release one day, was about a record about identity. I spent a lot of the time over the last 4 years really visiting some of the deepest wounds in my own story and grieving them. I had always acknowledged that they were there, and I'm like, but God is good, but I had never let myself grieve those wounds. And so it started, and that's how grief is. If you don't actually let it breathe and move through the process of it, that sorrow ends up coming out sideways, which is what was happening in my life. And so what happened is I gave myself permission to visit the deepest wounds in my own story and invited God into those places. And I encountered the tenderness and the nearness and the kindness and the empathy of God, who is a man of sorrows himself, and some of the most sorrowful places in my story. And it started changing me. It started healing things in me in a deeper way than I had ever experienced before. And so I was writing a record about that process. And then, in March, about a year ago, March 3rd, last year, 2020, an EF4 tornado woke me up in the middle of the night. I was home with my 3 kids. My husband was traveling. I've never been more scared in my entire life. Our whole house was shaking. It went right behind our house. And devastation in our neighborhood. And then a week after that, COVID-19 and safer at home restrictions swept. So it was this crazy thing of all these people came out of the woodwork the next day. It was so beautiful, rebuilding and what was torn down. And then that even got quarantined, the hope of community and togetherness and rebuilding together got quarantined. And so, and then in the wake of that, political and racial tension, feeling as a nation and maybe even as a globe more divided than ever. And then so this sense of a global sorrow and loss and pain and ache and longing happened. And so basically what happened is, in the midst of all of this, when the numbers were lower last summer, I had the chance to visit the Grand Canyon. And for the first time in my life, have you ever been, Kevin, to the Grand Canyon?
When I was about 2, so I can't wait to go back. So no, I don't remember actually being there.
Okay, great. So I had never been in my life, and we camped on the northern rim, and then we went down into the canyon, rafted the Colorado River, camped on the river banks, and then kind of pulled out of the river a day later. It was a quick trip, but our guides were just telling us when we were in this canyon, in the pit of a canyon, they're basically saying the canyon walls tell a story, and it's really a story of layer upon layer of disaster, one disaster after another: a flood, a volcano, a drought, an earthquake, a landslide, a mudslide. And and then this huge divide. And I was just sobbing on this raft in a
Oh,
because I'm like, this feels like such a picture of how chaotic and divided this our country feels right now, and how so
yeah.
many of us feel in this season, loss after loss. And then the story of the racial tension, it just is like wound after weary wound after wound after wound. And so I just was like, man, this is such a picture. But then there in the middle of all of layer upon layer of disaster, there is a river running through.
Mm,
And I mean, I was just like, this is the gospel. Like
yeah.
and that's the deal. Water moves to the lowest place. We just recently in Nashville had flooding, and water moves to the lowest place. And you look in your basement, and that is also our God. God is a God who moves to the lowest place. And our deepest sorrow and our deepest pain, there is an ever-present current of God's love that runs deeper than our deepest pain and ache. And that is there to carry us if we'll only let it back to a place where we know that we belong to Him, and that we have a place and a home where we belong, and that we belong to each other ultimately. And so I was there in that river being carried in the midst of seeing God meet me in my personal loss, but then now seeing God say, I am here even in this global loss and sorrow. I am still here and I am still moving.